What's happening guys, Dan Debenham here and welcome to After Effects Basics 2. Welcome back guys to After Effects Basics 2, which is actually After Effects Basics 1. Effectively, I did a video a few weeks ago with me using a motion tracking on a logo, an After Effects logo. I'll stick a card for it up above me, and that was me getting carried away, excited about using After Effects, and I did After Effects Basics 2 first, and so this is sort of a rework of After Effects Basics 1. So what we're going to do in today's video is we're going to look at the actual program itself a little bit, and we're going to do that by doing an animation, and then we are going to put some of that into practice, a little bit of what we've done. Something very simple. It is a tracking thing with making a scale and so on and so forth. However, we're going to take a quick look at what the actual program itself looks like and some of the terminology, etc, etc, etc. Some of you might be thinking it is a massively complex program. It is. This is going to be a long-going series of tutorials, which I'm going to eventually stick in a tutorial playlist of its own down on the channel page. So it'll be an After Effects. I'm going to split those out from the normal photography and videography, cinematography tutorials, because it is quite a big program. It is quite a lot to get your head around. It is quite a lot to understand. There is a lot of things we can do with it, and over the course of the next sort of few months we'll be doing these periodically, where we do ever increasingly more intricate things with After Effects, through to particle effects and 3D animations, etc, etc, etc. So that will be very interesting, can't wait to do that. But for today, let's take a look at the program itself. So when we get the program open and we have, you've got it in front of you and you are looking at the program and you see the boxes and the layout, let's just run through what those things actually are. So in the center of the program, you've got two boxes, new composition and new composition from footage. This is effectively the area where you will see your video and your actual finalized work. And this is where you will build the things that you need to build to make your special effects and your After Effects systems assets in that area. Then across the top you will see you've got the usual Adobe Learn, the standard small screens, libraries, etc, etc, etc. These are all things, workspaces, etc. They're things that you can do to adjust the way the thing looks and what particular item you're focusing on, whether that be animation or whether it be special effects, etc, etc. Then across the panel on the right you will see you've got all the basic audios, the previews, the aligns, libraries, characters, effects, etc. You've got all those things. They're all the things that there are the libraries that After Effects has in there, which you can use to produce your videos. At the bottom right you've got your timeline. This is where all the things happen. This is where each individual layer is stacked up. You'll see those in a minute when we do the animation. You'll see that those layers stack on top of one another. You can expand and collapse those layers, and it shows you the timeline, how long things are. And that is basically what you would see if you were working in Premiere Pro. That is your timeline effectively. So bottom left, that is where your assets are actually stored. That is where you can make adjustments to the assets from the timeline. So pretty much like the effects tab in Premiere Pro, you basically get drop downs and you can do transforming and you can add effects and you can tweak and change different parameters for each individual layer in that timeline. Now timelines, just to put this into perspective and just to clarify this a little bit, timeline in After Effects is slightly different to the timeline in Premiere Pro in that the majority of assets go straight into the full timeline and they're like boom, straight in. You've got lines of stuff in your timeline which you are named, and you have to kind of like navigate between those things. Top left you will see that you have got a couple of boxes there. That is your project panel. That is basically the panel where you will import all the assets. That is where the actual physical assets and your composition, so your basic job, the actual task that you're doing, which is called a comp in After Effects, is stored. So when you import something, that is where it goes. It's then dragged into the timeline. So that's in effect like your project bin, and that is where all the assets that you've got, images, videos, animations, Photoshop files, anything like that, Premiere Pro files, Audition files, they all go into that project bin, and from that point there, that is where they are kept. So without further ado, let's get into doing some animation, and let's get into sorting out things so that we can get some little bit of practice and we can see how these things work. You will hear terminology. In this particular instance, we'll be looking to use a null object. A null object is basically, it sounds like a weird and wonderful thing that you like, what the hell is all that about? Basically, a null object is a container file that contains the information that allows, that After Effects needs to use, that allows you to use that information once over a number of different situations. So for instance, in this particular instance, we're going to use a null object to collate some tracking information. That tracking information is then going to be used for our project, but that tracking information in that null object can be pointed to several different assets. So for instance, you could have images, you could have video, you could have text, you could have animations, all managed by that tracking information, all looking at it once. So it's almost like a do once, use many kind of situation, where it's contained in that one file and it can be used by many different assets, like a spider web almost, with a spider in the center. And that is basically the layman's description of a null object. With that, let's get into it and let's see what we have to do. Okay, so we've got our assets imported into After Effects, and we've dropped our video file, in this case, which is basically an aerial shot of a Ferris wheel. We've got that dropped into our timeline, so we are now ready to start doing the animation to that. As you can see, once your assets are in place, there are a few more options to choose from on the middle viewer screen. And effectively, you can zoom in up to sort of like 1600 times. You can reduce the quality, as we said previously in the previous video, work at like a quarter speed or half speed, half quality, and that basically will allow After Effects to keep up with what your computer to keep up with what After Effects is trying to do. After Effects is notoriously intensive on the processor, and it basically allows you to do a multitude of different things across the bottom of the screen, including change the active camera, and also you can change the timeline, and you can scrub through and back and forth to set points in your timeline. So what we're going to do is we're going to scrub the timeline to a point where we want it to be. Then we're going to grab the timeline handle, which is, as you can see, is the second one down, scrub it along, go up to composition, and then we're going to go trim to comp. What that does is that fits the composition, that fits the asset that you've got to the composition time that you want to be, so you're only working with the little bit of a slither that you actually need to work with. You're not working with an entire 2 hours worth of footage when you only need to animate or do animation on 10 seconds worth. Okay, next thing to do for us is to add some text. So we go up to the text tool and we click on our text tool, and at that point then we click into the viewer and we type the text. In this case, I'm going to type my name just because it's for ease of use, and then we can resize that via transform, etc, etc. We can go in there, make it as small or as large as we want, position it to where we want, where we've got the arrow key selected, and then we'll go on from there. And we'll have it sat dead center. So basically I've reduced the footage, the text by half, so it's now 50 by 50 rather than 100 by 100, so it's half the size it was. Stick it in the center, just basically so that we can see we've got a title coming towards us. The idea is, as you've seen in the video previously, the title will move towards us and get larger as it does so, and that is basically so that it shows an element of depth of field to the text. As you can see, playing it through, what actually happens is the text stays the same size as the clip moves forward, so the text almost appears like it's getting further away from the Ferris wheel. And what we actually want to do is we want to keep it at that Ferris wheel. So the next step to this is to add a null object. So the magical null object, which is where all the data that we're going to need is stored. The way we do that is we go to the timeline, which is the bottom part of the After Effects on the right hand side. Basically, we right click, so we control click or right click, and then you click new and null object. And that then imports a null object into our timeline, and we can then start adding that tracking data to it. And so what we need to do to get the tracking data into our null object is we need to go over to the right hand side on the libraries panel, and then we select the tracking box, the drop down box. If you don't see that, go up to view and to window and select tracking, and it will appear, and then we can go on from there. I'll wait for you. Okay, so now that you've done that and you've got all that sorted, basically what we need to do is we need to click on the tracker, and then we need to click on motion tracking. You'll see a white little box appear, and that is basically the motion tracking, but we're not quite done yet. There are 3 little checkboxes at the bottom: position, scale and rotation. And what you need to do is make sure that position and scale are checked. There you will see 2 tracking boxes appear side by side with a little arrow pointing between the 2 of them. And basically what that means is it will track both the position of the null object that you're wanting, will track both the position of the thing you're tracking and its scale, and it will transpose that onto our asset, in this case, my name. So, effectively, what we need to do is we need to grab those and we need to position them over something that's high contrast. This will get easier and easier the more and more that you do it. You will recognise what does and doesn't work from a tracking perspective, and what will and won't get you the best, cleanest kind of results. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move mine, and I'm going to stick them over the Ferris wheel, over some parts of the Ferris wheel, 2 parts, one on one side, one on the other, that look like the high contrast. As you scrub back and forth through it, just make sure before you do this that you scrub back and forth, and that you can see that the scene that you're going to track, the bit that you're going to track, doesn't significantly change. So it doesn't go from white into shade, for instance, and become dark, because the tracking data will lose itself, and you will then end up having to do this manually, which is what we did before, which is frame by frame. It's not onerous, it's not a massive deal if you do have to do that, but ideally we wanted to just do it all in one go, job done. And so once you've picked your parts and you've done what you need to do, basically you've got it all in position, you know what you're doing, you've got your footage, you've got your tracking points in place, you hit that play button and then you sit, fingers crossed, hope that it just does it all in one go. Watch for if there are any jumps or anything that it does that might move it from one place to another. So you want as smooth a line as possible coming from your tracking points to the end of the video. So it may wobble slightly, it may do whatever. You can do that, you can sort that out later down the line if you need to, but if it's acceptable, in our case what I did was acceptable, then you can just crack on with the next section. So once we're happy with everything, we've adjusted everything we want to do, you've gone back, you've done your frame by frame if things have not gone right for you, and you're not, you're quite happy with how things look. At that point, we then click apply in the tracking box on the right hand side, which is somewhere down here, and then, well, somewhere down here, whichever way, on the right hand side, whichever way that is. I'm looking at things backwards here. And basically, once we click apply, you get a box that pops up that says X and Y, etc, etc, etc. Click OK, because we're happy with that, we're happy with the X and Y, and that has applied that tracking data to that null object. It's now stored within that null object. So as you can see, all the data is appeared at the bottom in the timeline. You can see all the little diamonds, which is basically all the keyframes where After Effects has said, yes, this is where all the information needs to be set. Once we've done that, we'll close all that down, so we'll just reduce all that so that it's compressed, so I've got all this massive timeline with a load of data on there, confusing the hell out of us. Once we've done that, what we can do is we can get our pick whip tool, I love that word, pick whip, 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 pick whip, whip, and we can get that on the text. Once you've got that on the text, grab that, drag it across to the null object, so in my case I'm dragging it upwards, letting go, and that has accessed the null data. That is the tracking data in that null file. We're going to transpose that onto the text. Now effectively the text is now saying I need to follow those 2 lines that I put in, and it's going to make it larger or smaller dependent on where I am in space on that video. Yep, that's it, that's all done. That looks great, that looks fantastic to me. I'm quite happy with how that looks, and that basically is, in a nutshell, a very rudimentary look at how to do initial motion tracking. As I said, this will get more complicated as this series goes on and on and on. This is very, very simple. This is basics. The intention is that this series will have a basics set, an intermediate set, and an advanced set, where we steadily get more and more and more and more and more and more apt at using After Effects over a period of time, almost like a free training session, as it were. And if you did like this tutorial, if you thought it was useful and helpful and it's done something for you and you can use it in your own life, your own work, please do like and subscribe below. Leave a comment, let me know how you're getting on with it. I do respond to comments where possible. Follow me on Twitter, follow me on Instagram, and we will connect in other ways if you want to connect with me. If you want to know any more advice, you've got any more questions, please do stick them in the comments below. I will do my very best to get back to you and explain or help out in any way. And I will see you guys next time.